So I wanted to say, like, why would another side of it. Why would a player want to get traded? So a lot of times people don't think that maybe the player asked,
Yep.
right? So it's not always the teams are a bunch of assholes.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
players ask for it, right?
Mm.
So why do players ask for trades? Typically, the number one thing, what would you think it is?
Opportunity, ice time.
Opportunity and ice time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but here's a tricky thing, right? This is where kids or players have to be. Like what I always say is don't overestimate how good you are and don't underestimate how good everybody else is, because you could request a trade thinking that, for lack of a better term, the grass is greener on the other side, but that's not necessarily the case. You actually don't know. Like you better have a really, really, really good idea of what situation you're in currently, and you have to have a really good idea of what type of player you actually are. So for someone to even want you, right, if you're not getting a ton of ice time, what would make you think that someone is really that attracted to make a trade for you? Number one. And then if you do that, and you don't have a general manager or coach that can communicate well with you and say, oh yeah, you want out of here, you're out of here, instead of sitting down and saying, okay, like, I want to explain something to you. Okay, you're a third line center. Yeah, you're not on the power play. Yeah, you might not get this, but like you're valuable. You're doing this. Stick to it. If they don't have that, or and then explain to them, if we trade you, it might not be a better situation. It could be worse. It could be much worse. Your billet house might not be as good. You might think you're going there to be on the second line or the third line or on a power play, but that might not be the case. You might not be as good as you think you are, and you might have to, or you might even go there and have to start from the bottom again, and you might not be getting the ice that you're currently getting here. You might go to this team and the general manager trades for you, but the coach looks at you as one look at you and he goes, I don't like him, and you don't get that opportunity. So you got to be careful if when you want out that you didn't solve problems first. So having said that, if you are if you're in a situation where for good reasons that you want to get traded, well, before I go into that, this is why it's very important as a player to not only be a player on your team that is not tradable, right? Like, so what I mean by that is that you play so well that the team would never want to get rid of you. They still can, or there could be reasons why they would, but you play so that they're like, this kid is like, this is untouchable. And you play that way so that you can be tradable, so that you are a commodity for other people if it ever comes up to that way, so that you make the best of both worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
remember that exactly what you just said was pretty much the situation for me when I got traded. So what happened was that when I was playing junior, I was in that situation where I was like one of the top players in the league at the time, and the team that I was on didn't want to trade me, and just because of like the team circumstances that were going on, it wasn't a good situation outside of the on ice play. Like it was all the extra stuff around that was an environment that I didn't feel like I had a choice. I feel like I had to go. And then the team I got traded to, it was a better situation surrounding the team, but it was a worse situation in terms of the playing, right? So I went there expecting I'm gonna hop right in and be right back to where I was, and like the coach had other plans, and I that was something I wasn't aware of. It wasn't communicated to me. Obviously, I wasn't prepared for that. So here I am thinking I'm gonna jump in there and it's gonna be a better situation, and it was quite the opposite. Like the team situation was better with the team that I went to, and that I was thankful for that because the team that I came from was an absolute disaster. But in terms of the on ice play, it was not a better situation at all. So I was hoping for something different, and then I got smacked in the face with the reality that, hey, man, it's not just going to be better because you want it to be. And that's something that you have to be prepared for if you're in that situation as a player. Because a lot of guys, when they start to play junior, it's real easy to say, well, I'm just going to get traded because things aren't going your way, right? It's a very common attitude where something's not shaking the way you want it to shake. And whatever the reason is, you're just like, I want out of here.
Yeah,
and then
it's easy for the teams to say that too. We'll just trade these guys, and it's like, you know, I'm a big firm believer that solve your own problems first. So like, because I got a couple guys that played U.S. college too, and they switched schools. It turned out that it wasn't any better anywhere else. Like, so what was the problem? And that's what you have to ask a lot of the times. What is the problem? So sometimes you're just on a team where you're never going to get a shot or you're not their guy. Okay, I get that. But you have to look inside and and say, okay, like I'm not playing the way I could play. Is it the coach's fault? Is it the team's fault? Like, because maybe it is, but what can I do to make it better? And we've talked about this several times. So the first thing you have to do is you got to look inside and say, okay, where do I need to be better? Have I finished hits? Am I scoring goals? I'm supposed to score goals. Am I scoring goals? Am I making plays? Or when I make a play, is it end with me? Am I in the gym? Am I showing the team that I want to be here? And all these different things. So and then you got to give that an honest shot to fix. Have I talked to the coach? I said, Coach, I'm not sitting here bitching, but obviously as a hockey player, I want to move up in the lineup. I want to have an opportunity somewhere else. What is it that I'm missing? What is it that I can do better? And not just for words, but to actually get some feedback from your coach. And when you get that feedback, do it right to the best of your ability. And if you take care of your own self to make the team better, and that's another thing. Are you doing it to make the team better or you better? Because that's an important thing too, right? So when you look at all these things and you put an honest effort into making yourself better and it still doesn't change, okay, maybe a change of scenery will be better. But until you do that, you'll never know. Because if you bring your same self somewhere else and your same self hasn't been your best self, then that's probably not going to change a whole lot of things.
Absolutely, man. I'm clear as day. Clear as day. Remember this exact thing you're talking about? Like this was my whole mentality. So I was on a team where I was the go-to guy because it was a weaker team. And on any team I could have been a go-to guy, but in my first situation it came easy. Like I could cut corners. Like I could do things that weren't necessarily best for the team, but I was just better than everybody on the team. So it was me and one other guy as forwards on my my first junior team that we were the guys that ran it for the last stretch that I was there. So I could get away with those being more selfish because there was nobody to take my spot, right? But then when I went to this other team, it was much more of a battle. And although there was a lot of circumstances that I didn't have control over, that had the adults that were in charge behaved the way that I think they should now, looking back at it, it would have been much better for me. But for me personally, I didn't do some of that stuff. Like I didn't think, have I done every single thing I can to make this situation better? And I know for a fact, looking back, I did not. You know, there was a lot
It's
of
the
the why
hardest
me.
thing to do, right?
It's like taking the ownership, man. It's so hard, man.
The hardest thing to do is to sit there and say, I'm not good enough or I'm not working hard enough or it's my fault. That's the hardest thing to do.
So hard, man.
It's just easier to blame other people or say, I'm better than that guy, but he's getting the opportunities. The coach doesn't like me. I'd be better off somewhere else. Just the easiest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to dig deep, to actually dig deep, and say, this is where you're falling short and you need to be better. Because if you watch enough video, if you actually sat there and watched video of yourself, like unbiasedly or you maybe even critically, you'll find some stuff.
For sure, man.
Huge.
For sure. I can think of all the things right now for myself, like going back that I could have done different or done better. And man, I would absolutely die to have this perspective when I was playing junior. Like it would have just been so beneficial to have, or to have someone explain to me. You know, that's the other thing. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that it would have been nice if the adults were more like the adults and how they communicated with the team. But that's not, you don't get that all the time, right? And so to be able to take the ownership and say, hey, like, have I actually done everything I can do to make this situation better before you go say, hey, I want to jump ship to go to the next place? Because if on some level you're part of the problem, you're bringing the problem. You know what I mean? It's not just going to be the problem goes away because you think that it's somebody else, right? So that's why it's important that you're careful about what you're asking for, right? If you haven't done the analysis and really tried to solve your own problem to the best of your ability first, then you're just the problem's gonna follow you because it's attached to you to some degree, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, you have to remember that this is not being disrespectful to coaches. This is just reality. Like if you play 4 years in the OHL, NHL, college. Well, college is a little bit different. They have a little bit more stability, it seems. But if you play 4 years in one spot, you're probably going to be there longer than the coach, anyways. So if you have an issue with the coach, that you're probably going to outlast them. Actually, Adam said that when he did a podcast with us when he was playing in Chicago. Keenan was bagging the shit out of them, and he was just getting frustrated. And he said Steve Smith grabbed him and said, "Just don't worry about it. You'll be here longer than this guy." And it's funny when you get that perspective, right? So sometimes you got to just plug through things. Think if you do your thing long enough, like with all seriousness and hard work and fixing problems and fixing your deficiencies and just trying to make yourself a better player and practicing hard and doing all the right things. Normally, if you have that base skill to be there, things will work out.
I know.
You know,
it's really one of the hardest thing, man. Like I remember but that's why when we talk to our guys now that are here training, I try so hard to explain this type of perspective to them. Like all the cliche things you say, control the controllables, make sure you talk to your coach, take as much ownership as you can. But it's so hard to do. Like I remember it's so hard to do as the kid. And maybe had I had a resource of someone giving me this information, it would have made it easier and it would have been helpful. And that's what I'm hoping when I'm trying to communicate it to our guys. But it is like, I don't know why that maturity, like having the maturity to be able to do that when you're in those years, it just doesn't happen a lot. And so hopefully like hearing the information, being exposed to it when you're in those years, the 16 to 20, when it's this type of situation is possible, maybe that's something that will better equip the kids to deal with the situation. Because man, it would have been so helpful to have that like level-headedness or the maturity to be able to self-analyze and whatever.
You have
right?
to have the maturity to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
When I look at, I know, I talk to my son or other kids too, but just my son's my son, right? So sometimes I'll talk to him, and there's a huge message that I'm giving him, not to be hockey dad, just like there's a huge message there, and it's like, yeah, dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to grab on.
And then he circles back. He's like, yeah, dad. Yeah.
Yeah, once it's his idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
right?
like, hey, he just turned 17.
I know that's part
Turned
of the
17, man. I don't expect him to be running for president here. Right?
Yeah.
He's like he's an intelligent kid.
Yeah.
But like, there's only so much that brain can absorb, right?
Yeah.
And understand. Like as mature as he can be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, so